Hello again, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting the show once again this evening. Up first, hazardous weather graphic. A lot less on it than we've had over the last days, several days, weeks maybe. Still, we've got, for example, here a winter weather advisory out for the lower Yukon River Valley area, and that's out until 7 p.m. Tuesday, tomorrow evening, for continued areas of mixed precipitation and snow, rain, and gusts 40 miles an hour, that sort of thing. Also, winter weather advisory out here for the Seward Peninsula, the western Seward Peninsula, Bering Strait coast, and the St. Lawrence Island zone there. That's out until 9 a.m. Tuesday. And that's for about the same conditions here: gusty winds, snow, maybe mixed precipitation, possible freezing rain, and then hopefully it improves after 9 a.m. tomorrow. And then we've got a winter storm warning out here for the Seward Peninsula eastward, and this area is out until, let's see, midnight tomorrow night, midnight Tuesday there, for more snow and possible or gusty winds will reduce visibility to less than a quarter mile at times in this area. Otherwise, pretty good everywhere else, although we've got more storminess poised to move into the Bering Sea. Today on the satellite imagery, you can see kind of a couple of boundaries here. This is an old one right through here with this cloudiness. Really not much in the way of any precipitation with it, especially up here to the northeast and east. And another front pushing eastward here, bringing some gusty winds and rain earlier on to the Pribilof Islands and down across the eastern Aleutians, and then a big shot of cold air coming in from the west, Kamchatka Peninsula, and that's dropped temperatures into the upper 20s out there at Shimia with westerly winds gusting 45 miles an hour and snow showers, and that's advanced all the way west, east to Adak, pouring snow showers, temperature about 31 degrees there, and gusty west winds. And then kind of a rain mix with snow pattern going on, actually letting up there for the Pribilofs on down to the Unalaska area. Then the fetch of moisture continues to flow north or southeast to north-northwest here, and bringing rain, kind of continuous light rain along the Alaska Peninsula today and all spots of the southwest coast here. But nothing heavy. Cold Bay today had about 0.3 of an inch of precipitation, and then Nome had 0.2 of an inch water equivalent precipitation, and those are the two heaviest amounts I could find anywhere around the state today. And of course, I've been in this area. There's no precipitation going on here to the east, and big high pressure aloft, centered right over the Kenai Peninsula more or less today, is continuing to divert this storminess northward and keep it from penetrating southern Alaska. We've got flow coming over the top there that's bringing clouds in, occasional gusty winds into the north slope and the Arctic coast, but generally dry conditions, sunshine here across the Gulf of Alaska, on down the Panhandle, lighter winds today than what you saw yesterday, and clouds building here over the Gulf of Alaska and kind of streaming northwestward here, clipping Kodiak Island with some light showers today. AKwx had 1/100 of an inch, so very light showers going on there. Main rain band back here to the west with the front that's just about stationary. Otherwise, high pressure over the Gulf, high pressure up over the northeast interior, and high pressure over the Yukon makes for continued dry conditions here, and that holding this storminess back to the west, keeping the fronts from pushing eastward, even though they're trying to. Had one right through here, it dissipated. This one weakening pretty rapidly as it comes along. Still winds gusting today, 25 to 45 miles an hour from Bristol Bay, northwestward there across the southwest interior, Nunivak Island, St. Lawrence Island, up to the northwest coast, and cold enough still for snow up in those areas and blowing snow. Kind of a mixture of precipitation depending on which observation site you looked at, whether it's rain, snow, or mixed rain and snow. And winds diminishing along the Alaska Peninsula. And then the the cold air coming in from the west-northwest is at strong 958 millibar low, lifts northward here across the western Bering Sea. And that's giving a good shot of snow showers into the western and central Aleutians. Looking at the forecast for tonight, this front holds up right off the coast there due to the stubbornness of the high pressure in the Gulf of Alaska and southeast interior. So this portion is really going to weaken here, and just look for some occasional light precipitation, diminishing winds, neither of which is much of a factor except for reducing flying conditions. And then areas of light snow up across the southwest interior here. And then you add a little wind, a little more wind. Snow might be a little bit heavier up through here, but still not too much. And St. Lawrence Island could go either way in the precipitation, and still gusty winds there. And then that leading edge of the cold air, snow showers, western Aleutians, but just kind of a trailing edge sweeping across the Fox Islands or in toward Nikolsky there. And then look for rain and snow to increase once again over the Pribilofs later tonight as this trough brings in or approaches from the west. Otherwise, clear skies, temperatures, some areas easily falling below zero again, and light winds right on down into Prince William Sound, the Gulf of Alaska, dry and winds not too bad. Still some gusty outflow winds in channeled areas along the eastern border up to Lynn Canal, but nothing like you saw a couple days ago. And for the forecast for tomorrow, you completely lose a gradient there. So light wind conditions, sunshine, and that pattern actually is good for the eastern interior, eastern half of the state here from Prince William Sound, Gulf of Alaska, right on up to the eastern Arctic coast. And then as you come to the west here, you start to pick up some clouds, and this front just stuck right here stationary, continues to slowly weaken. Occasional light precipitation, Alaska Peninsula, mostly in the form of rain and then light snow at times or snow showers. Some areas here, even under the frontal boundary, probably won't see anything at all. And the wind's definitely diminishing from what you saw today, just maybe 15 to 20 or 25, the Bering Strait up along the northwest coast, and about 10 to 20 to even lighter than that from Bristol Bay and Togiak Bay down across the Alaska Peninsula. And that southeast flow, still enough picking up moisture here with the upper level ridge pulling off to the east. That's allowing that strong southerly jet that's pulling the moisture up to advance eastward too. So we're seeing that in the Kodiak, a little more extensive tomorrow, some of which will probably reach southern Cook Inlet and Kamishak Bay. Otherwise, Kenai Peninsula, northern Cook Inlet, Matanuska Valley, as I mentioned, everywhere up will be in the sunshine. Weak trough for some rain and snow showers to the Fox Islands, Pribilofs, and then this storm pulling up is forecast to develop into a pretty strong system and drive northward, as you can see, rapidly west of St. Lawrence Island. And you can see quite a tight gradient here in advance of that, and yet another one that pulls northward on Wednesday afternoon here. So gale, storm force winds for sure, and that southerly flow is going to keep it quite mild, and even some possible moderate to heavy amounts of rain possible with this, pushing into the eastern Aleutians, Pribilofs, right on up to the Yukon Delta coast. Mixed precipitation, the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, into the Chukchi Sea here, kind of a mixture going on, and strong winds and rain or snow about sums it up. And then a few scattered showers here from the western Alaska Range, southern Kuskokwim Valley down across Kodiak Island. And the clouds advancing a little farther to the east inland here on Wednesday. High pressure still holding there over the upper Yukon Valley and the Yukon, and to a lesser extent now starting to retreat in the Gulf of Alaska, but strong enough to keep it dry and mostly sunny. Copper River Basin, North Gulf Coast, 40-mile country, right on down the Panhandle to Dixon Entrance. And for the lows tonight down that way, teens to upper 20s and below zero, definitely 10 to 20 below for the Copper River Basin, up into the Tanana-Tok area, a little below zero up in the upper Yukon Valley, above zero for the Arctic coast. You can see the temperatures contrasted pretty sharply here from east to west. Of course, back here in the west, that's where you got the clouds and the warm southerly flow. So temperatures for your lows in the lower 30s, upper 20s, lower 30s, mid 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, and mid-upper 20s there in the northwest. And then your highs for tomorrow, not much different from your lows from tonight. Lower 20s for the northwest area here, mid-20s Seward Peninsula, and then into the 20s all the way down into Bristol Bay. Cooler as you head east, staying below zero, possibly Copper River for Gulkana and the upper Yukon Valley, with temperatures in the teens to lower 30s there for Kodiak. And then for the next Wednesday morning, looking like this, 5 above to 15 below here in the eastern interior, above zero along the Arctic coast, and in the 20s and 30s here in the southwest, upper 20s, Seward Peninsula, Panhandle. Single numbers to as warm as 30, quite a variation there as there usually is, and then highs upper 30s to lower 40s, 20 for the Copper River Basin, lower 40s, Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, single numbers up there over the upper Yukon Valley, lower 30s for south central Alaska, as well as the Seward Peninsula, mid 30s for the southwest coastal areas there. Arctic coast, mid 20s for the central coastline there, and then back into the teens. And then it looks like the Aleutians out here, mostly in the lower 40s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First flying weather graphic here showing some IFR from the Bering Strait and the Seward Peninsula, southeast across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and into the southwest mountains there. Otherwise, big area of VFR here over the central Bering, Alaska Peninsula, all the way out to Amchitka. Then you're back in the marginal VFR. VFR here over the southeast interior, the north slope, and of course across the Panhandle. Tomorrow afternoon, really about the same pattern here in the Gulf of Alaska. It looks like the marginal VFR off the coast, but catching southern Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and slipping halfway up Cook Inlet. And then back to the west, again, the remnants of that front dissipating here. There'll be some areas of IFR out there with it. Otherwise, VFR in the east on down the southeast coast and the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. In fact, widespread VFR out here over the Bering Sea, and then some IFR slipping on up to Adak, westward to Amchitka. And for Wednesday morning, that area kind of shifts eastward here, and you got VFR either side of it. Area of marginal VFR here continues over the western interior, all the way down into Cook Inlet, a little farther north now, possibly into the Anchorage area. Definitely Kenai and just about the entire Kenai Peninsula is in the marginal VFR, except for the east side there. Stays VFR North Gulf Coast right up across the Tanana Valley. Could be some IFR in the southern slopes of the southeast Brooks Range, North Slope Arctic Coast looking really good. And the Panhandle, another VFR day, at least morning, but it will be VFR through the afternoon on Wednesday, so chalk up a couple of more good days there. As well as the eastern interior, Gulf of Alaska, marginal VFR now retreating to southern Cook Inlet, but still hanging around the southwest interior here, Kodiak Island, and just a band of marginal VFR in the southern slopes of the Brooks Range here into the Kobuk and maybe Koyukuk Valley. IFR, Point Hope southward and expands south of the strait here, and mostly Nunivak Island affected, some marginal VFR clipping the Yukon Delta coast, and then lower conditions down into the Aleutians. Passes and the Tuvik and Avigan, both VFR tomorrow, and for the Lake Clark and Merrill, I'll go VFR for the pass, but on the eastern entrance, could be some marginal VFR, that moisture trying to come up from the south. Rainy though, too far to the north, you'll be out of it, so VFR there. And windy, VFR, or Isabel VFR, and Mentasta also VFR. Tanita, a day just like today coming up. And Portage, another VFR day. Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels shifting eastward or continuing eastward. Today this area is more here over the west central interior, but the upper ridge slipping a little bit to the east there, and that allowing more southerly flow out here to the west, also push farther to the east. But we're looking at pretty good freezing levels, 6,000 feet in the Gulf of Alaska, as well as up over the northeast interior. Icing, none in the interior or down the southeast coast. And then a band here coming into the west coast, dissipating band, just areas of isolated moderate from the Alaska Peninsula, and even less of a threat here over in toward Kamishak Bay, but this area extends all the way up into the Chukchi Sea. Big break, more icing coming in with the next storm of the considerable moderate variety there coming into Adak during the afternoon. And a jet stream here. Here's this upper level ridge. Tomorrow afternoon, a little farther to the east than it is today, more set up more over south central Alaska here, the center anyway, and that's going to allow that southerly flow, especially this branch right here, to come a little farther east and bring some moisture up. Otherwise, big split right here with this branch heading northward across the eastern Bering, and high pressure controlling the Gulf of Alaska and Panhandle eastern interior. And at 9,000 feet, pretty good south to north wind flows we've had, up to 60 knots ahead of that system over the Aleutians, otherwise 40 to 50 on up, and lighter over the ridge and panhandle. Same thing at about 3,000 feet, 5 to 10 knots there out of the northwest for the southeast coast, otherwise 20 to 30 to 35 over the eastern Aleutian, southeast Bering northward along the west coast. And then lighter winds here, just 5 to 10 knots from the Gulf of Alaska all the way up there to the eastern Brooks Range, picking up to about 15 knots. So taking a look at turbulence, considerable moderate chop here from the western Arctic coast all through the interior, western interior, and then the Aleutians looking rather bumpy as well. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
We have a big solar flare coming in, so we're out here on an aurora hunt. It's a CME, it's a dynamite, coronal mass ejection. It's when the sun, it kicks off energy and these explosions that are larger than the Earth, explosion type things coming off of sunspots. And if that energy is pointing straight at the Earth, it gets caught up in our magnetic field, and that energy, electrons, come down our magnetic field, collide with oxygen up there about 50 or a couple hundred miles high, and that's what generates the northern lights. My job as the photographer and the aurora hunter is to be in position, you know, location, location, location. And I like to think I'm composing. Mother Nature, it's a bit of a teamwork thing, you know, she's got to put on the show, but I have to be in the right position and of course with the right tools and the know-how. I've stopped keeping track of how much time I spend out here in terms of hours. It's more in terms of weeks or months, or at this point years now. You know, it was always in me. Even when I was a kid growing up in the lower 48, I would spend nights sleeping on our trampoline, just staring at the stars. I'm in 4th grade and I'm going, wow, look at those stars. And I'd see how many nights in a row I could sleep on the trampoline. And I think my record was 23 nights in a row. So I was doing kind of strange things for an Iowa country boy. I can remember specifically the very first time I saw the Northern Lights. It was 1989, the peak of the solar cycle, and I was going to graduate school in Laramie, Wyoming. And all of a sudden we had heard the Northern Lights were out. It's like, what are those? I'd never really seen them before. And my goodness gracious, we were on top of a mountain in the Laramie Range and they were turning blood red. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And the very first picture I took, that was 1990. Now, an old film camera, Pentax K1000 on a plastic Kmart tripod. Took 2 shots on slide film and got them back. And I thought, oh my gosh, this beautiful green thing swirling about. And from that moment, I was hooked. When I realized that you could preserve the auroras on film, I just experimented a ton. I'd had a heaping stack of slides, the no good ones. The experiments gone wrong, you know, too dark, fuzzy, out of focus, too light. I had this huge garbage can full of excess slide film, and that was just the learning curve. Well, when I go out here, it's all about getting the shot. And my wife and I, we've called it the hero shot. But the hero shot is the one where you just come home and you go, look at this. And everyone goes, wow, and you feel like a hero. It's a wonderful feeling, you know. It's good for the ego, of course. It's good for the business. But if you kind of strip that away, it's good for what's inside you, because that's really the hero moment in nature. And Mother Nature's putting on this show that is just mind-blowing. It's unbelievable. When I first resigned from my day job, that was in 1993, 6 and decided I wanted to become a full-time aurora hunter. My goal from that moment and to this day still is to get 1 hero shot a year. I figured, and I'm talking the kind that somebody wants to buy from you and hang on their wall, where the auroras are extremely bright, very active, turning colors, where you can't believe your eyes. If you get to preserve a little sample of that with a photograph, well, it's what we call the hero shot. Wow, what a feeling. I mean, oh, you're elevated, levitating, you are lifted up, your spirits are so high that I love that feeling. And I think I get that so much from seeing cool things in nature that I will go way out of my way to find that. And I can, you know, the next day, well, I'll be just laying there thinking about it and thinking how lucky I was or how fortunate. Of course, I just, you know, spent 2 weeks sitting there staring at the sky and not seeing anything, so you got to remember that, you know, luck is kind of a relative term, but I still just feel incredibly lucky to be even in a position to where I could have been there, taken a photograph of it, and just mainly experienced it. Well, that feeling could last for days.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Looking at today's sea ice analysis, it's pretty evident here that the ice south of the Bering Strait's taking a real beating here as the heavier white zone decreases and the thinner stuff, which is the blue, increases. That's even going on here, peeling off well off the north coast of the Seward Peninsula. Far western Arctic coast, same thing going on here, and really losing it here along the Bristol Bay, or the about gone in Bristol Bay. This is what it used to be like, but Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta continued to diminish, and no change coming up for the next several days in this northerly retreat as storm after storm keeps driving northward through the Bering Sea. Light winds on the southeast coast tomorrow, especially the outer coast, north to northeast at about 10, to northwest, back to the north maybe up to 15. And light northerly winds through the southern central inside waters, north 20 for Lynn Canal. Outlook for Wednesday, those pick up a little bit, north 20 knots here along much of the coastline, except way up north there, they'll be more out of the northwest. North comes back up to 25, good for small craft advisories for northern Lynn Canal, and north winds at about 15, central southern inside waters. And Prince William Sound, light southwest wind, 10 knots, seas 2 feet. West-southwest 15 here for the North Gulf Coast. And the Barren Islands, light, south 15, seas 4 feet, southeast 20 for Kamishak Bay, and Cook Inlet, northeast 10 to 15. Outlook for Wednesday, northeast 10 for Cook Inlet, and light west winds now for Kamishak Bay, about 15 knots and across the Barren Islands. North Gulf Coast, west 15 to 20 knots, seas only up to 6 feet, and Prince William Sound, west at 10. Kodiak Island, southeast, 15 knots for the day Tuesday. Southeast 25, small craft advisories there for Bristol Bay. And also southeast 25 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. And for Wednesday, pretty light winds, Kodiak here, just south-southeast or variable at 10. And then from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, south 15. And now you get into some wind conditions over the Alaska Peninsula, next system pushing in. Southeast 35 on the Bering Sea side of the 11-foot seas, southeast 20 up there in Bristol Bay. For the far western Aleutians here west of Kiska, southwest 30 tomorrow, 17-foot seas, southeast 25, and then back around to the south-southwest at 25 to 30 knots, 25 to 35 knots for the central Aleutians there. And for the Fox Islands, small craft advisory, southerlies 20 to 30 knots. Outlook for Wednesday, big increase in those winds, up to 45 knots sustained for the Fox Islands there, with seas anywhere from 18 to 28 feet. And the central Aleutians, southwest 40 to 45 knots, with seas as high as 26 feet. And then small craft advisory winds about 25 knots from the west-northwest on out to the west. And for the southwest coast tomorrow, southern Nunivak Island, south winds at 20. North of the island, south 25, so brisk wind advisories there all the way up to St. Lawrence Island. Gales, St. Matthew Island, seas building to 26 feet, and the Pribilof's 25 knots with 18-foot seas. Checking out Wednesday, full gales come into the Pribilofs right out of the south at 40 with seas up to 24 feet, southeast 35 with 16-foot seas, and southeast gales here along the southwest coast right on up to St. Lawrence Island and about 25 knots in Norton Sound. Eastern Boulevard Sea coast, pretty light winds, 10 to 15, then 15 all the way down to Cape Thompson. From there to Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, south 25, so brisk wind advisories actually all the way down to Wales. And for Wednesday, no change. Brisk wind advisories here from Wales to Cape Beaufort. South 20 for the west side, central coast, south 15, east-southeast 15 for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And for tonight again, good high pressure here holding over the central eastern interior areas into the Yukon and the Gulf. That's going to keep this system out along the coast from advancing any further east and just keep funneling the moisture on up to the north there. And you'll see continues to weaken as it tries to, or it does edge a little bit to the east here, really washing out down in Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, especially wind-wise. Even the winds diminishing here in the northern area, the precipitation getting lighter and more intermittent and scattered in nature with time. Scattered showers over the Pribilofs. Next big storm here coming into the Aleutians tomorrow afternoon drives northward, makes a really good jog up to the north here, just west of St. Lawrence Island. That could be some pretty strong winds when that happens with mixture of precipitation all the way back down to possibly heavy rain, storm force winds, eastern Aleutians, and that's all I have time for.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.